Sir, thank you so much for speaking to CNN News 18. First of all, let me introduce Sir. Sir was the Director of Intelligence in Mossad for a longest time. Then later, he became a foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu in the last century. And then in 2009, if I'm not mistaken, he became National Security Advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu. So thank you so much. It's absolutely a pleasure speaking to you. We have heard a lot about you in India. Perhaps you were also interacting with people in the Indian intelligence setup during your tenure.
Yes, I was, and I had frequently visited India, and I had the highest degree of appreciation and admiration for my Indian colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir, my first question to you is, how do you look at some countries not even condemning the terrorist attack, and some countries, mainly from the Western Bloc, are backing Israel, sending foreign ministers in solidarity? Are we looking at the possibility of further escalation in West Asia, or perhaps can there be also a possibility of Middle East getting changed forever?
Well, the phenomenon that we are seeing here in Hamas is not an unknown phenomenon in global terms or in other regions. What we're dealing with is, first, these are terrorist organizations which have an ideology which is the most extremist form of Islamic fundamentalism, taken into such heights of brutality in which they employ the most barbaric methods of human massacres, and going after civilians and engaging. And the only equivalent you can think in the West, for example, or in the Middle East, is ISIS and the way it conducted its massacres and all those raids with complete wanton in breach of every norm, with immense savagery, or the Al-Qaeda going at September 11 and attacking American civilians in New York and so forth. Now, in some ways, the subcontinent in Asia is also afflicted by this form of radical extremist Muslim fundamentalism that is taking shape as very brutal form of terrorism. But, you know, there are degrees and degrees. This form is the most savage and the least acceptable. The only strategy one can employ against those bodies is simply to fight them and eradicate them. They are not representative of the best interest of their own people. They are just criminal in the international legal form, and they should be fought against wherever they appear. And they do appear in Asia, in Europe, in North America, and in the Middle East.
But Middle East looks divided because there are a lot of countries. I will come back to my original question. There are a lot of countries, they have not even condemned the terrorist strike. They are not, in fact, ready to call Hamas terrorists. How do you look at this situation?
Would you please repeat the question?
I'm saying that Middle East looks divided when it comes to some countries not even condemning Hamas in the strongest manner. It's the Western Bloc which is mainly backing Israel right now. How do you look at this situation?
Well, as you know, the world is a stage, and the way nations behave today is very disturbing. Many countries have their own national interest, and they often take positions in accordance with how they perceive their interest to be. Now, there are some countries today which belong to the, I don't want to call that the axis of evil, but it is an axis of evil, which combines Iran, which combines Hamas, Hezbollah, and then countries that have entered into some kind of cooperation with Iran, for example, Russia. So we did not hear from Russia any condemnation of this Hamas atrocity because they made their own calculation in the context of their invasion of Ukraine, in the context of their way they perceive their interest. They ally themselves with Iran and Iran's proxies. Other countries have also some narrow national interest, and they balance their interest, and that reflects in the attitudes that they take on this issue internationally. But what is the clear division of views is the following. Those countries which belong to the liberal democratic tradition, the advanced countries which have the norms of conduct, all of them support Israel, and it is in that group that Israel belongs. India is the world's largest democracy. India is also affected by Islamic extremist terrorism. So
Yes.
we would expect nothing less from India. And indeed, near as I can tell, the Prime Minister has been supportive of Israel on this issue. Other countries, while we do not like what they do, but often should they not support with Israel, it is more often because of their own narrow, cynical, and sometimes non-democratic norms, and that does not give them any credit.
Sir, it's a since we were talking about we are discussing behavior of some countries. Would like to know from you, sir. In fact, in Indian media also, some countries are being heavily criticized for providing their soil as a safe haven to terrorists like Ismail Haniya. I'm talking about Qatar. Uh, you know, uh, uh, in India also we have been doing stories on how Qatar has provided safe haven to Hamas leaders like Ismail Haniya. Do you think that it is a time for Israel to tell Qatar, look, enough is enough. You cannot let the terrorists from Hamas to use your soil so that they target Israeli territory. Do you think the time has come?
Well, it has come even before, but this new atrocity, which is of enormous proportions, maybe accentuate the need for a firmer position against such countries being abused and providing either sanctuaries or safe havens to terrorists. We would certainly expect that, and that may be expected from other countries. For example, one could impose sanctions on countries that do indeed let themselves being exploited in this manner. They should not go unpunished for this kind of being accomplices of terrorism. Now, with the Hamas, there is yet another complicating factor that they are using now the Palestinian population of Gaza as human shields. So they develop this instrument of harming their own population so as to defend themselves, and they're doing that with complete disregard to the safety of their own people. In fact, they're exposing them. At this very moment, what the Israeli government is asking the population of Gaza is to move further south, 10, 20 miles south, so as not to become human shields exploited by the Hamas, so that we can deal with the Hamas military or their capacities rather than when they're hiding behind innocent Palestinian civilians. But the
Okay.
world at large should get its act together, because this is becoming riskier and riskier, this phenomenon of this form of terrorism in its most deadly form.
Okay, sir. I would also like to draw your attention to U.S. Deploying warships in Eastern Mediterranean. Gerald R. Ford is in Eastern Mediterranean. Destroyers are there. In fact, the report suggests that U.S. can move the second warship also to the Eastern Mediterranean. UK has also, the report suggests that UK is also moving the Navy brigade to the Eastern Mediterranean. So, how do you read these developments, and can we look at a possibility, if this doesn't stop here, can we look at a possibility of a third nation joining this battle, or perhaps some other nation also joining this battle, or try to take advantage of the situation? Is that the reason that US is deploying warships in the Eastern Mediterranean?
Well, I think that this American and British show of force here has a number of reasons, some of which are very strategic and calculated, and it is to prevent further escalation. The President of the United States has warned the Hezbollah or even Iran or any other third parties from exploiting this situation because, and he hinted at a threat. He said, don't do it. And that was, in a way, a stabilizing intervention. That is a very responsible position to take. But at the same time, I should not left unsaid that this is an admirable show of loyalty and credibility from our friends and allies, because we are at a moment of distress. A terrible atrocity has been committed to us. The Jewish people have a memory of being left to its own devices, being isolated, being attacked, having millions of victims with no one coming to our rescue. This is not the case here. We are at a moment of distress. We are resilient. We'll fight it out. But the fact that the Americans and the British, in the best tradition of allies and responsible friends, has come around is not to be unapplauded, as I say. And I appreciate that. This is the best kind of conduct befitting allies who share values and interest on this matter.
Okay, so since you have given half of your life serving in Mossad, you were the director of intelligence. Would like to understand from you, how do you look at this particular failure of Israeli intelligence, the border security setup, which Israelis have always been proud of? In fact, Israel has the best fencing, the fencing across the borders. How do you look at this particular terror attack? And do you really think that it's a time for the Israeli intelligence, the security setup, to do introspection, given what has happened? And do you also see that? Do you also see this as a failure of Prime Minister Netanyahu to protect his own people?
Well, my friend, since there is something that I do like in Indian discourse, is often your directness. You talk it straight and you say the honest truth to one's face. I once had an Indian diplomat hearing me out and then telling me to my face, rubbish. And I relished that comment because it was a form of criticism, which I might have deserved. So let me give you a very honest response to this. Well, one should never be proud. Hubris or pride is deadly. Even among ourselves, we Israelis, when we talked about our intelligence community, we never said we are among the best. We said we are the least bad, which means we knew, and one should be cognizant, first, that surprises happen. The thing that it is least surprising is the occurrence of surprise. Secondly, we have flaws. It does happen. So it did happen this time, and it will be, there would be a commission of inquiry, and we should take a very hard look. It's clear that it's been caused by a number of failures, some of which have to do with collection, some of which have to do with analysis, some of them are due with negligence, some have to do many causes, not a single cause. And we will isolate that cause. But as you asked, it is not only the Israeli intelligence community which failed this time. It is also the military who, when confronted with a surprise attack, which is the most vicious kind of a condition to encounter, they were not ready for it. So we had many flaws in the way we reacted. We lost time, and that is also will be looked at. And finally, you ask whether the prime minister is responsible. Well, yes, of course. He's not only formally responsible, the entire leadership, the government who was responsible for managing our policies, he and they have conducted a policy which was oblivious to the situation. You know, I used to say that leaders get the intelligence they deserve. And this leadership, Netanyahu himself, because he had a completely misperceived concept of the situation, what makes it worse is that it was a self-serving policy that he followed, not because it was the best policy or the most valid policy in national terms, but because it served his petty political interest.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
is a
Yes.
very serious thing. But he will be, and I think the Israeli people who are outraged by that, when the war is over, we will have to do what we have to do. And those responsible should be held accountable, and it should all be pursued professionally, honestly, with a sense of self-criticism. Everybody should give account, and according to the law. So we have a systemic condition which has set us back. But again, it's not an historic, it is historic, but it is not something that could not be reversed. We are a resilient nation. The morale in Israel is extremely high. The degree of people the number of people who show up for the draft or for the mobilization is 130%, much more than expected. And we do have certain qualities, and therefore that will come into force, and we will win this. But the objective remains, and that will be the test. Organizations like Hamas have no place. One cannot negotiate with them. They do not want to negotiate. They are simply criminal beings of the worst kind, and the objective is still to eradicate that force.
Okay. Sir, why I asked you the last question, since you said that Indians are quite direct in asking questions. Reason being because I have been speaking to a lot of people, those who are the victims of Hamas terror, and they are telling me that army arrived 4 to 5 hours late on the site where Hamas terrorists were present. Then even some have said that the fencing was destroyed without knowing. They used drones and the sophisticated mechanism and the way they have advanced their capabilities, Hamas, was something which was unexpected. And they also, many of them have been saying that it's Prime Minister Netanyahu, as you rightly said, that he was more focused in holding on to the post of Prime Minister rather than doing justice to the people of this country by protecting them. But thank you so much, sir, for your honest comments, honest feedback, and more power to you and your countrymen. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I tell you, never underestimate your adversaries. The Al-Qaeda who flew airplanes with such precision and their own death into the high rises of Manhattan has also shown technical and know-how and a sense of determination. So that you should assume that even the Hamas in its most deadly form can still do things which are technically demanding, and they will try to deceive us, and we were deceived. Nothing is worse than that, and that lessons also ought to be learned.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and all the best to you.
Thank you.